Hello, everybody. Cheers. Happy Wednesday, or whatever day of the week it is when you're watching or listening to this. Welcome to the With Her Two Hands podcast, where each week we celebrate the women who build, fix, and make the things that make the world go round. And this week, we're having a serious conversation. Not that all of our conversations aren't serious, but this is a serious conversation about how we retain women in the trade, specifically the automotive industry. This is a topic that has been top of my mind for a couple of months now, for a long time actually, but specifically the last couple of months, as I have had several women reach out to me and tell me, after 5-6 years in the automotive industry, they've said, I'm done, I'm tired, I'm leaving, I'm doing something completely different. And I've been, frankly, it infuriates me. I'm not mad at them. I'm mad that we have a system that is still so broken that women aren't staying in the industry. And so rather than just sitting in my anger, I have invited a dear friend of mine to join me in a conversation about this and what we can do about it. So you may remember way back, early days of the With Her Two Hands podcast, episode 28, I believe, Jill Trotta was on as my guest. And today she is coming back. She has over 30 years of experience in the automotive industry. But before I invite her on, real quick, I just want to thank you guys all for being here, for taking part of your day to hang out with us and be a part of this conversation and be a part of this movement, really, to normalize women in the trades, to increase the number of conversations we're having about this, because without conversations, nothing changes, right? I don't know that there's a magic wand or a magic pill to change anything, but I do know that talking about it helps and raises awareness. So thank you guys for being a part of that. Please, if you like this series, make sure you hit like, hit subscribe, leave comments down below. The more you do all of that, the more people see this, and more people need to see this. So thank you guys for being part of it, and let's help spread the word and make sure that we start to normalize women in the trades and change the experience for women in the trades. So without further ado, let's bring on tonight's guest. She's actually right here with me in California right now, since I'm clearly not in my usual studio in a lovely Airbnb. Let's bring on the lovely Miss Jill Trotta. All right. Da-da-da! Here I am. She was just lurking in the wings.
Lurking in the wings.
All right. So, Jill, real quick, for those who have not seen you or did not see the episode that you were on, if you guys want to learn more about her backstory, definitely go check out her past episode. It is up on YouTube and on all of the podcast platforms. But give a quick nutshell of your backstory, because you've been in a lot of different parts of the industry.
I have. I started out as a technician. I had a Volkswagen Bug that kept breaking down, and
they're the gateway drug. Volkswagen Bugs are the gateway drug.
They are, for sure. I had an uncle who had an auto shop, and he said, if I fix your car, I have to charge you, but if you use this idiot's guide and you go over there, I'll help you. And he did, and it kind of ignited a very strong interest that sent me, after graduating from college, to trade school, became a mechanic, worked on cars for a period of time, built the majority of my career as a service advisor, service manager, fixed ops on dealerships and independent. And then about 12 years ago, jumped the wall into the tech side and the aftermarket side of the industry. And that's where I am now.
Yeah.
So it's a long 30-year career. I've worked parts and service. I've worked dealership and independent, and now I've worked in the tech side of the industry and the support services. So I have a really good holistic view of.
And when she says she works on the tech side, that's more like the computer and software side of things, and it's a lot of the third-party programs that wind up interacting with shops and dealerships and providing services. And so what that means is that not only does she have her experience as a technician and as a parts person and as a service advisor and in all of those different roles, but she also has the collective experience. I have with speaking with so many women in the trades, she also has this collective experience of all the people she's dealt with throughout her 30 years, and different shops and different environments. And so I think your perspective is a really good one. And we've talked a lot about this. So I thought that this would be a good conversation for you and I to have.
Yeah, I'm excited and nervous to have it. There's a lot to unpack there.
I know this might have to be a multi-part series. Stay tuned, guys, because I'm going to try to get a couple of the ladies who have left the industry to come and have a conversation about why they did. But in lieu of that, I mean, obviously there's lots of reasons why women could potentially leave the industry, right? We know that we lost a lot of women in a lot of jobs in general, but particularly in trades jobs during COVID. So that's a big piece of things.
I mean, before COVID, I really felt like we were making headway, like slow, but we were making headway. And coming back out after COVID, now that everybody's out, I honestly feel like it's rolled back before COVID, so that we not only didn't stay steady, I feel like
we went
took
backwards.
A step back.
When the numbers support you. So I remember when I first became a technician, women made up 1.9%, I think, of all automotive mechanics across the U.S.
That was me and you.
That was me and you, and,
and
like
Carolyn,
and Lori Johnson,
and like
Lori Johnson,
3 other people. Yeah. It was us.
There were like 5 of us, and then we were at a point, because there's been all of these efforts, right? Like all of these women's groups and even just in the overall automotive industry have really made an effort, I feel like, to bring in more women. A lot of the trade schools are trying to attract female students. There's been all this effort to attract women to the trades.
And talking to Jennifer Maher, like with Tech Force.
Yes.
Constant effort in trying to recruit women.
Yes. And I think it paid off because we started seeing an uptick. We're seeing tech schools that have close to 10% female students.
When I was in tech school, there were 3 women.
Yeah,
and
there were
300 students.
Oh, we had 7 women out of 3,000 boys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, not good numbers. But now 10% in a lot of schools, not everywhere, obviously. The numbers were up to 2.4%, according to the Department of Labor. And now, the most recent, I believe, is 1.8. So we upticked, and then we downticked. And we actually did go backwards. So your instinct, your inclination, I think you're dead on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely is what happened.
And I see it on the tech side and on the administrative side as well.
All right. So because I know women make up like 25% of the automotive aftermarket as a whole, but that includes clerical positions, secretaries, phone answering, everything.
And that's the overall industry. But when you're talking about leadership positions, it's significantly less.
And you're seeing it tick down since COVID.
Yes.
So in your opinion, is it COVID that was the problem, or is that just kind of masking the bigger issue?
I think it just masks the bigger issue. And I think women's issues and things, that women have in their lives, like their families and their marriage and their family and their kids and their parents and all these things play into that. So during COVID, when the kids weren't in school and things, women had to step back and take care of their families and
because it was assumed that the women would be the ones who did that still so much in our society. I'm seeing, what is this Faye saying? It did become, okay, so Faye said that it became popular on the internet. And that, I think, contributed to maybe attracting more. I think that was part of the movement, right? Like there was everybody's focus was on how do we attract.
And we had good momentum.
We did. We had great momentum. I felt
like there was good momentum going in.
But I feel like you bring up a really good point, but I think there's a couple of layers to that, right? So we were getting great momentum. Our focus was on attracting women, attracting young girls to the trade schools, and that's all well and good. But we never looked at, like, what does it take to retain them?
Yeah.
Like, you can invite people to your party, but if they're not welcome once they get there, they're gonna leave.
Yeah.
And your point, adding in like the family responsibility and that our society is still kind of like assumes the women will be the ones to step back into the home to take care of the kids in the event of COVID and that kind of stuff. Just, I think, highlights how like the other part of the industry not welcoming, like we're very stuck in this calendar, the schedule that people work, and there's not a lot of flexibility in how the trades time clock works, I guess.
Yeah, you're there bell to bell. Yeah. And there's no flexibility in that schedule.
Do you see on your end any change in that? I know we've talked a little bit about that.
I do see a little bit of change, but from the more newer companies, you have your all the new electric vehicle companies come in. They're centered in California, and they're providing a longer workday, but like less hours in that workday. So this is your 12-hour time, and you have to work 8. So you can come in later, you can leave in the middle of the day, you can do things. So they're trying to build in some flexibility so that the technician's life becomes a little bit easier.
Right.
Yeah, part of the reason I was glad to not work on the service driver in dealerships or in independent shops is because if I had a doctor's appointment, I couldn't take care of it.
Right. And I think that's one of the overarching things that like the automotive industry is losing people in general, right? Like, let's be clear, like it's not
massive
just
tech shortage,
women, right? We have a massive tech shortage, and we're losing men as well. There are men quitting and saying, I'm tired of this. I can go work somewhere else for better pay, for better circumstances. And I feel like there's been this, like, this is the way we do things. This is the way we're always going to do things. We're never going to change because this is the way it's always been done, until now we've got these, like, they're software companies. These electric car companies are software
companies. And a lot of the aftermarket companies are software companies.
Yeah.
And it just, there's flexibility in that. And so you have people like they're moving, like myself. I moved out of the day-to-day automotive industry, servicing customers in cars, and into the tech side, which provides me way more flexibility. Still, though, the culture of the automotive industry is pervasive, and that culture is not always friendly for women. And, I think a lot of the progress that we did make is women being hired in as support staff. So if a company says, I have 30% of my workforce is women, my question is, what percentage of women are in leadership? Because if the women on the front lines don't see themselves in the leadership, they're going to leave because they're going to assume there's no opportunity there to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many layers. There's so many layers to it. I mean, your point even of just you transitioned out of the hands-on technical thing, right? I transitioned out of hands-on technical thing. Yes, I still work on cars. Yes, Jill still works on cars, but we're not doing it on the line at a dealership or at an independent repair shop. And sadly, most of the people who I know who are doing the best in the automotive industry are not wrenching anymore.
Yeah.
And I hate saying that out loud, and I hate saying that on a public platform, but it's true. Right. And I love this industry, and I want more people to become technicians, but I also want them to have better work environments. I want them to get better pay. I want them to have more flexible schedules. And the, like, as women bringing up this topic of like the work environment isn't necessarily ideal, like, I want to be clear, it's not ideal for anybody. It's not ideal for men or for women, because men appreciate being able to go see their kid's soccer game in the middle of the day, or go to a doctor's appointment, or actually take time off work when they're sick, because most jobs give you like 5 days of sick pay. Yeah. But then you get berated if you take them.
Yeah. Or maybe you get 2 weeks of vacation.
Maybe. If you're like, after you've been there for 5 years. Yeah. But again, heaven forbid you take them. Heaven forbid you take a sick day.
Yeah. And I think we really have to reevaluate the culture of what's going on in the shop, because that translates into what then it comes into all the other companies. It's the overall like attitude of the industry, and it makes it really hard. And my mentor Tammy Teckenberg talks about a male designed system.
Mhm.
Like it's the automotive industry, because is largely male, is a male designed system, right?
And yet I
It's
find
not
that
man, not male dominated.
right, it's male designed. But like I know more and more men who don't like it.
Yeah.
And who are upset about the very same things. But there's still this attitude of, it's not the industry that needs to change, it's the women, right?
Mhm.
Women who can't, a young woman. So what sent me over the edge in my like anger and frustration and like calling Jill in to have this conversation was a young woman who was struggling at a shop. And the person that she works with is known even by the people that like him as an asshole. Like they know that he's an asshole. And she brought up repeatedly how challenging he was to work with. And she was literally told, you just need to have a thicker skin if you want to make it in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And like, or we cannot tolerate people being assholes. What a concept.
Right? We just
but we tolerate it.
Human.
and so like I'm amped up about this, y'all. I don't know if you can tell, I am amped up about this. You shouldn't have to have a thicker skin. I've been told that my whole life too.
Yeah,
You've been told
too.
it.
Oh gosh.
I've been told it. And heaven forbid we do complain about something, then we're being sensitive. Then we're being, oh, see, that's why we shouldn't have hired a girl, because see, she's complaining about stuff. Like, but what we're complaining about is stuff that is basic human needs, male or female. And I know plenty of men who don't like the hazing and don't like the BS and don't like, so.
And that, like, just roughness of the approach to communication.
Roughness in the approach to communication. She's so gentle. Yeah, I'm trying to gentle. Don't be gentle. Yeah. Take the gloves off. Let's not be gentle here. Let's be real.
I mean,
that was very cute.
Just coming so aggressively and not with like any like empathy or any just kindness.
Yeah. And I think there's this other layer that is, it's a hard one to discuss because it's hard to explain, because it's like, how do you describe water to a fish, right? If you've never experienced being the other, right? Being a part of a marginalized group, being the only, then it's very hard to explain how exhausting that is.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is the harder one to deal with. Another woman I know who's left the industry started out in another industry entirely, where both men and women work alongside each other flawlessly, shockingly. Side note, how many male shop owners have women because the boys in the shop wouldn't be able to handle it?
Yeah, because they feel like they'd be harassed.
Right. I'm like, men and women work together in other industries just fine.
And like maybe you should just work on not tolerating harassment.
Yeah, like that's just not okay. So she left to go to an industry where everybody works together. And she said, Bogi, I cannot tell you how nice it is. I'd forgotten how nice it is to be able to walk into a space and not feel like everybody is questioning whether I belong there. Like just that piece alone, the exhaustion of that, of whether you're being watched because they're waiting for you to screw up, or you're being watched because they're like, I'm so proud of our girl. Yeah. We've got a girl. I think girls are great. Either way, you're being watched.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because people always ask me, what, like, being a woman in the industry, like, what is like your superpower? What's this thing you always have to do or overcome? I'm like, prove that I can do the job. Even though I have a great resume, I've been to a lot of places, I am super capable. I can do the job. If a man comes into that position, they're going to automatically, and this is not just in shops, this is all the way up, that they're not going to assume that I know what I'm doing. I have to prove it every single time. And earlier in my career, I was fine with that. It was like a badge of honor. But like as I
It gets
get
old.
older, and I'm tired of that.
Yeah.
I can do the job.
Yeah. And like here we are. I am 25 years in this industry. You're 30 years?
30.
A lot.
I started when I was like 5, so like 33 years.
So a lot of years. And we still feel this way,
Mhm.
right? Like I still feel like I have to prove myself every time.
Right?
You still feel, and it's exhausting.
And I'm highly capable. So are you.
100%.
We're well known. Like,
Yes.
we are known for what we do.
We are
but we still
established.
have to show up and prove it. We get asked to talk, speak, say something, mentor people,
and sometimes
show them the ropes.
Even the very people who are inviting me to speak somewhere will then ask me a question like, so do you really know how to rebuild engines? No, I just fake it real well on TV.
Yeah, I just play a mechanic on TV.
And my favorite refrain now when people question me is because I want to punch them in the face, right? Like when somebody questions me, but I know that that's not useful. I know that that's not a helpful behavior or helpful response. So what I do is I just smile and I say, can I ask you a question? If I were male, would you even ask me that question? And it kind of puts it on them to kind of realize that they wouldn't ask those questions of men. But it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. So I don't fault the women who say, I'm leaving because I'm just tired.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a harder one to fix.
Yeah.
Clearly, y'all, I am stuck in anger. I'm frustrated and I'm tired.
And think about, when I think about the women who, on the aftermarket side, who've won these awards, Woman of the Year, Woman of Excellence, who have built their careers in this industry from the ground up the entire way, get into leadership and leave. Two that come to mind, Amy Bonder.
Mm-hmm.
Was with Bridgestone Firestone for a long time. Amazing leader, amazing woman. She no longer works in the industry. Laura Suave, former CEO of Fiat.
Yeah.
CMO for Pep Boys.
Left the industry and is happily working in another industry. Now, there's problems in other industries, but not the same problem. Sure. And I guess let's be clear, like every job has its drawbacks. Yeah. Every industry has its challenges. It becomes a matter of which BS are you willing to put up with, right? No job is perfect. No industry is perfect. However, I always say about teachers, right? If like one of your students fails the test, it's because they didn't study hard enough. But if all of your students fail, it's because you didn't teach well enough. And I feel like as an industry, it's like if everybody's leaving and we have such a tech deficit and we have such a shortage of people, maybe it's not the people that are the problem. Maybe it's the industry that's the problem.
And the culture that's perpetrated in the industry. Yeah. It's
toxic.
And until there is like massive movement to change that culture, starting in trade schools.
Yeah.
Starting at the very beginning to change that culture going all the way up, it's going to continue.
And I guess that's where my frustration comes in and my exhaustion comes in and why I need a voice of reason to like help me focus on solution, because I feel like we've been fighting this fight for a long time. And it does need to start at the beginning. It needs to start in trade schools and in shop classes. But shop classes and trade schools are mostly, not always, there's some amazing teachers. There's some amazing shop teachers. So please don't get me wrong. There's some wonderful, wonderful folks out there. But there's also a lot of teachers who are simply former technicians who don't want to wrench anymore, who grew up in this same toxic environment and are now perpetuating that culture in their classrooms.
Yeah.
And the horseplay is tolerated, and
the comments
and the playing jokes on each other is thought of as funny. Like,
yeah.
And so it's getting perpetuated. So how do we break the cycle? And how do we, like, what is the solution that we need to change the industry in such a way that is improved for everybody, for both men and women, so that we see an increase in the respect that our technicians as a whole get. And in doing so, create space for women and other minorities. Because we can attract them all we want.
But how do we retain them?
How do we retain them? And we retain them by creating space for them to where they feel
and creating
accepted.
Equitable situations internally. Not just equality, but equity. So you're in the automotive industry, there's people who grew up with cars. Like myself, I didn't grow up with we had cars, but we didn't fix them ourselves. And so I kind of just got into it from happenstance. But coming into the industry and building that career on the way up, it really is difficult because you run into a lot of. I was recently out doing shop visits with a startup that I'm working with, walking into shops, and we walked into 10 shops. 3 of them had these calendars still up. I was just like,
the nudie calendars.
Yeah, the girly calendars up. And I was, one of them, I just stood there and I couldn't even speak. I was just like, I can't believe I'm standing here.
Right.
Looking at this. And what do I say? Do I rip it down and throw it on the ground? And
we want to. And I'll hear people say, well, what's the big deal about that? Right. Or other people will say that doesn't happen anymore. That's in the past.
It's an unsafe environment.
It's not in the past. First of all, clearly it is still happening. There are good shops that would never have nudie calendars up. But
I know great shop owners, so do you.
Absolutely.
This is not,
Right, but there are lots of them out there still that do use. How many of them?
Yeah.
3 out of 10?
3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. That's not great numbers, right?
Yeah.
But so what's the harm in it? What more of an advertisement do you need to say that women aren't welcome here or seen as equals?
Yeah.
That this is a man's space because we have pictures of naked women on the walls. Because this is a man's space.
Yeah.
That's what it says subconsciously, that women are not welcome here.
You talked about culture, and the automotive industry is this really established old school industry. Mm-hmm. So that makes the culture really hard to change. My hope, and where I generally tend to like to work, are the newer school companies who are coming in and bringing that culture in. But I can tell you from somebody who's worked for those companies, it is such a hard, you just butt up against this really hard wall that the industry is kind of built around himself. And then you go to
where you're struggling, the third-party software companies are struggling in how they interact
with the old school auto companies. It creates this clash because there's a culture clash there, because these companies have different culture. I think about my time at Repair Pal. Good culture,
right?
Caring about people, making sure that you had what you needed to complete your job and to do it, and the training and everything, and dealing with people in a kind way,
right?
And then you come into these other companies and it's very rough. If you don't know what you're doing, they're not going to help you get there. The internal competition. I swear to God, I was successful as a tech because my hands are small. And they would teach me things if I would reach up under the dash and pull things out for them that they would have to remove the dash for.
Yes.
This was why they would train me, because they could push my hands into small places, and help.
This is true.
Save them hours, right?
100%. Yeah. It's interesting. And the software companies too, we're also talking about an industry, the automotive industry specifically, that is kind of adverse to new technology, right? I mean, how many conversations have I had with technicians who are I don't want to learn how to do digital ROs. I like doing handwritten stuff. Or the industry started going downhill after fuel injection and screw these hybrid cars. There's this adversity to change and adversity to new technology. And yet the software companies are saying hey, let's do this different. And I think that's why there's a lot of excitement for me, actually. This is the only place where I get excited, because you can hear I'm frustrated and burnt out, but I get excited because I feel like there's opportunity for women with the increase of electric cars and hybrid cars, partly because the men don't want to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them, right? I'm making broad, sweeping generalizations.
Well, and I think
here,
the level
but-
of detail and learning
Yeah.
is more suited for women.
And the companies are more suited for women.
Yeah.
Because they are more likely to have flexible hours. And when I say flexible parenting, they're more likely to have flexible hours and just a different culture that is more inclusive.
Yeah.
than
Inclusive
the
of
others.
everybody.
Yeah.
And, it's a new idea. You need, I kind of think of things like, if you want the same, keep doing the same. If you want different, do different.
Yeah.
And a lot of these new companies are doing it differently. And
But they're fighting. They're fighting against the establishment.
They're fighting against the establishment.
It's interesting. I'm going to bring up another topic from kind of left field a little bit here, because I think about other trades. And I had a conversation, episode 179, I think, with Lacey, who was a diesel mechanic 50 years ago.
Oh.
And like she got into it because in the trades, and this was back in the day, the trades meant you had union, and the trades meant you got paid the same as a man if you did the same job. And so she left an office job to go do diesel mechanicking because she said, this is a job where I can get paid the same as a man and not be discriminated against because of the union. So the trades actually offered
an opportunity for
equity,
equal pay.
Right.
Yeah.
And somehow it's changed along the way here where it's not that anymore. And I think in some of the trades that are more heavily dominated with unions, it's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of a different conversation, at least.
Yeah, because that's more standardized.
And in automotive,
there's
the
very
not
few
strong.
Unionized shops. Yeah,
very few.
Yeah,
and I'm probably going to get in trouble with a lot of folks because a lot of folks don't agree with unions. But I feel like.
But if you're talking about pay equity and you're talking about those kind of things,
yeah,
and then there's regulations put around it, like that's part of the problem. I can tell you, I'm much smarter now, but it's happened to me a bunch of times where you come on in and you find out that you're like, I'm getting paid X amount less than that person. And one, I'm more qualified.
And I'm their superior.
Right for me. What
How did that happen?
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that goes back to my dealership days. I remember this one time. I was a service advisor. And this guy I'd been a service advisor for 10 years. And I'd worked at Dinan Engineering,
Mm-hmm.
and I was at a BMW dealer. So I know BMWs, right? And this newbie who'd only been writing service for 2 years left his pay plan on the floor, and I found it.
Oh, geez.
And that is what prompted me to leave and I actually tried to leave the automotive industry. At that point, I was like, this is some bullshit, and I got to go. So I started applying for jobs, but the only thing I've really done is the automotive industry.
Right.
I have a degree in recreational therapy, which is neither here nor there. But I was trying to leave, and I got a job at Avis Budget Rental Car, managing their fleet at San Francisco Airport. I was like, okay, well, I'll go do this.
It's cars, but it's not really.
Because,
it's not as involved.
I rage quit my dealership.
See, just did you hear that? I rage quit my dealership. And that is what's happening with a lot of women in the industry. And instead of saying, let me go find another shop, because maybe they've been to 2 or 3 already and had similar experiences, they just get so fed up. They say, screw this. I'm out. I'm leaving entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. And fortunately, or unfortunately, I don't know which, I'm still here. I left, didn't take that job at Avis Budget, and found Repair Pal. And was like, okay, they're dedicated to making this a friendlier place for consumers. Maybe we can make it a friendlier place to work overall.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of got into the aftermarket. It was after rage quitting my dealership.
Right.
Not really wanting to go work for Avis Budget. That just seemed like it wasn't what I wanted to do.
And I feel like it's all tied together, right? The culture that is appropriate for being nice to customers and is welcoming to customers and makes all customers, male, female, whatever, feel welcome. That is the same issue that affects why, as employees, women don't feel welcome and why we don't have more women and other minorities as employees. And I think I'm going to venture to say it is also the same reason why we have a technician deficit, because parents don't want their kids to join this industry because of the bad reputation.
Oh, my dad was mad.
Right.
He was so angry that this is what I
mine
was
weren't
gonna
mad,
do.
but they were definitely like
Yeah.
very confused by it. And because it's got a bad reputation. And unfortunately, we have players that are still contributing to that bad reputation.
Put you there.
And he was right.
And yeah, I mean, I have a level of acceptance,
Sure.
but you know, I'd say I don't have the same level of acceptance if I was a man sitting with the same qualifications.
100%.
And
I had a male colleague that I know from the TV world say, why be so upset about all of this? Don't pay attention to the fact that you're a woman or not a woman. Just let your work speak for itself. And my response was, I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to have my work speak for itself, but unfortunately it doesn't. Not because my work isn't good enough to, it's that it's not heard or seen in the same way because it's coming from a woman. And that's not to say that there aren't wonderful people out there who do accept women in the trades, not to say that there aren't, I just want to put that caveat there. Like, I'm not saying that everybody's awful. There's a lot of wonderful, wonderful people,
men and women, and
absolutely. But how do we change all of the things? Because it's all intertwined. Same reason why technicians can't get paid what they deserve to be paid, is because we're still seen as the subpar.
Seen as grease monkeys.
Yes.
And grease monkey days are gone.
Totally
gone.
We have cars that drive themselves.
Yeah. And
you
stop
need to
themselves.
Be a rocket scientist to work on today's cars.
Yeah. And you have to have like a high degree of technical detail when you're talking about, ADAS calibrations and things.
Yeah.
The level of documentation and detail is so high.
So there's all of these kind of compounding issues, right? We've got the culture that needs to change. We've got the reputation that needs to change, but we've got people who are still reinforcing the reputation. And there's all of these things that affect how consumers experience the industry, how employees and coworkers experience the industry, and how do we, what's the fix? Because it feels so complicated, and I feel like we've all been trying to pick away at this problem in different ways over the years, and I'm not sure that it's doing anything. I have my thoughts on how to fix it. I want to hear what your thoughts are.
I mean, I've thought about it a lot, and it's why I tend to go for when I'm looking for my next opportunity with I really like newer school companies or companies that are really making a concerted effort to make that change. And there's there are companies out there that are old school auto companies that are investing a ton in DEI and really trying to make it go forward. And change the culture internally. And, fortunately, I know who those companies are, and those are the companies that I'm trying to, find my next opportunity with.
Although I do feel like maybe we've gotten to a place where upper management has started to get it, get that the culture needs to change and it needs to be more inclusive and all of the things, right? But then we have this gap. Often, I deal with a number of manufacturers and talking with them, upper management, they're all about it. Their culture is amazing. They're wonderful. They're great. But then their dealership managers or their shop foremen, the people who are actually implementing the culture, they aren't on board. And so there's this gap where the grassroots gets it and the higher ups are now starting to get it. But there's this in-between space where the implementation, and at the end of the day, when you're a woman or just a technician, any gender, that's who you're dealing with. You're not dealing with the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
you're dealing with your shop foreman
Your frontline employees
and your service manager and the boots on the ground. And if they're not on board,
then it's not going to happen. I mean, it needs to be endorsed by management, and management needs to support it, fund it, but the real work needs to be done in the ranks, like all the way up, starting at the bottom.
Yeah.
Starting at your frontline people. Yeah.
Do we see that happening? Do you see that happening? Because I've not seen that.
I've not. Before, say like 2018, 2019, I felt like there was a real movement.
Okay.
In a lot of companies, you have DOT, you have Cadia, you have companies coming in doing really good DEI work and offering it to companies. And I feel like it was getting a lot of pickup and being talked a lot about in 2018, 2019, and then
COVID.
And then COVID hit and changed it. And I feel like getting traction now in that area is increasingly difficult.
Yeah.
Companies are worried more about their bottom line, but, constantly turning over employees is expensive.
Right. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I want to hear what you think on this. So again, I'm probably going to make a lot of people upset with this sentiment because I know it's not a popular one within the automotive industry. But kind of going back to the conversation about unions is like, I feel like one of the biggest challenges the automotive industry has is that there's zero regulations and zero oversight. And like, yes, we have ASE voluntary certificate program. Wonderful. It's great. ASE has been doing a lot of stuff, but it's voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no requirements. Like literally the person who does my nails, not that I've had my nails done in a while, but when I do,
they've had a lot of training.
They have a lot of training. They have more certificates and more certifications and more licenses and are required to have those than a technician does in the United States. And I feel like personally, if we had something more similar to like what they have in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, all of the other industrialized countries have these apprenticeship programs and have, they have programs where you're licensed as a technician. And we don't have that. And I feel like that's what we need, because at the end of the day, we like to say, if it's not regulated, then they'll regulate themselves. Well, our industry has not done a very good job of regulating ourselves. Our pay is subpar. Our working conditions are subpar. In a lot of places, they're great. And I don't want to take away from it. I think this industry is wonderful. Guys, I think this industry could be.
I mean, I love this
wonderful
industry. I'm wearing this industry that I got at the Women in Automotive, Women in Auto Care conference, and like that conference was such an upper and so wonderful, and so many wonderful women working so hard, and I feel like I got so much momentum and energy coming out of it that I'm wearing this every day. I got filled back up. But I can tell you how quickly it gets depleted. That was like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And last week I was just like, I don't know. Like I was telling my wife, I don't know. I want to be a part of this community. I feel like I've built my career in this community, and I have really good friends and colleagues, and I've got like an incredible network.
Yes.
And I want to stay, but sometimes I'm just like, I don't come on. And I'm just hoping like my next opportunity is with like the company with the culture that
where you can be part of the change. Yeah. Continue to be. You've always been part of the change, but continue to be part of the change and get filled back up in that sense. Yeah, I do. I love this industry. I love its potential. I love a lot of the people in it.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be like sounding super negative Nelly about it. But if I didn't love it, I wouldn't care. I would just leave. Right? Like if I didn't love it, I would just be like, screw it. This is awful and I'm leaving. And that's not the case.
So I'm going to talk about a very hypothetical situation. Okay. This did not happen. So you're sitting at a leadership retreat with your other senior leaders.
Okay.
And this is, could be an automotive company.
Okay.
Probably is.
Hypothetically.
Okay. And so in this leadership retreat, you put up out of your company the 10 people that are at risk. And suppose this company had 30% women. So the 10 people that are at risk
to lose their jobs.
To lose their job because they're underperforming. And 8 of them are women. And suppose in the previous 3 months, everybody who has resigned has been a woman. What do you think that conversation sounds like? For me, it kind of would sound like, hey guys, because perhaps I'm the only woman in the room.
Right.
Hey guys, does anybody notice? Does anybody notice that there's 8 out of 10, 80%? And perhaps our company is only, this hypothetical 30% women. Does anybody see a problem with that? Or are we just shitty at hiring women? Do we just hire the wrong ones?
Right.
And everybody just stood there like, and
no response.
No response. Like, and you would typically just get no response. And
like, let's be clear, women are not magical. Some of us suck. Right?
Yeah.
Some of us are not good at our job.
And
do deserve to be fired. So it's not like you should never fire a woman and you should always hire women. We're not magical, right? We're just like men.
But when
some
there's
of us are
like
good, some
a
of us are
huge
not.
discrepancy, you need to think about the culture in the company. One of the things that I know for me on leadership teams that happens a lot is I'm constantly talked over. I'll be talking and then somebody just talks. And as now I'm better at like pushing back. I'll be like, get out of my space. But earlier in my career, I would just let them, and then I would just be mad, and then I would just leave. Because if they didn't listen to me then, are they going to listen to me when I'm complaining about, or not even complaining, when I'm
airing a legitimate concern?
When I'm airing a legitimate concern, and when you're paying me a decent amount of money to be on your leadership team, but you're not letting me speak.
And if 8 out of 10 of your lowest performing people are women, maybe the standards that you're using for judging their performance is skewed, right? Or maybe the culture is making it such that they're not able to perform for whatever reason. So there's, again, it goes back to that, like if one of your students fails, the student didn't study.
That's
but
exactly
all of your students fail, you didn't teach well enough, right?
Yeah, and perhaps there should have been a suggestion that you dig in and you interview every single one of them and talk to them about what is going on.
Yeah.
And in hypothetical cases, I would have done that and found that talking over, not feeling like, not seeing themselves reflected in management as often the only, a lot of times I am the only woman, I am the only gay woman, I am the only Hispanic woman, and I'll be the only,
And you're really established in your career, so at this point you have a little bit more confidence to kind of speak up and ground to speak up. But I think a lot of women earlier in their careers, particularly, are afraid of the ramifications. Like, if I speak up, will this come back and hurt me? Will I not get the opportunity? Will I not get hired? Will I not get whatever? I know women in the trades really struggle with, if I speak out against the sexual harassment that I'm experiencing, will I get blacklisted or not hired again at another shop, because they're afraid of that, right? I have several women who have told me that has been the case for them. I know it was for me. So
when you make these, like when you go and you talk to HR and you raise a concern, I mean, I feel like, and I've experienced at that point, you're the target. You become the target. Yeah. HR protects the company. HR doesn't protect employees. No. HR is there. And they may come across like, oh, they're empathetic and listening, but ultimately HR is there to protect the company.
Can I tell you an anecdotal story? The woman who I was talking about who was working with the jerk and was told that she just had to have a thicker skin. She was also told by HR that it's, they understand the female HR, the only female in this meeting, said, and then there's that time of the month when emotions are high. We understand.
I could not even.
Like, I'm just gonna let that sink in for a second. Seriously?
I mean,
This is, and when it's known that the culture is rough, and it's known that this individual is a jerk, that it's being blamed on her time of the month. Now, Wonder Women don't speak up.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, speechless. I'm speechless at that. And it's still happening. And that's why we still have to have these conversations, and we still have to constantly be talking about it. And people are always asking me, like, why do you harp so much on women in the industry? Because
Somebody
it's still
has
an issue.
to.
Yes.
I know it's really hard that I go in and I'm on leadership teams, and it is literally my job to bring it up. But then you become the most unpopular person because you're constantly going, does that seem funny to anybody? That just doesn't sit right with me. Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't, like, do you think we could do better?
Yeah.
And I've had really, we're talking about like women in here, but, people of color in the industry
100%.
have similar.
Minority. It's people of color. It's sexual orientation. It's any minority in the automotive industry and in a lot of the trades. Although some of the trades are better than others.
Yeah.
I feel like.
No, I mean, I was literally
mostly the ones with
heard
unions
in the last year that, and this was, in a tech environment where there was people there that came out of the industry,
Mm-hmm.
like the day-to-day industry, and were making like inappropriate comments. And even in that environment, I was told, I brought it up, and how these are microaggressive comments, and like to make people feel a certain way, that, oh, he just came out of the shop environment, so he's not used to. I'm like, behaving like
like
a
a civilized
respectful human being. He's
Right.
not used to that. Like, I've been to shops, like I know great shops, like Dynamic Auto, like that is a put together shop where people are treated right.
Yeah,
like
there's
he has
tons
a chain
of
of them.
great
There's
ones.
a bunch of them,
which
like,
is proof that it's possible.
It is possible.
Right. Like, I want you guys to hear what she just said, that like he had poor behavior. People were acknowledging that it was poor behavior, but they were excusing it because he just came from the shop, where that's expected and tolerated, and we excuse it, and it's okay, and it's justified. Can you talk really quickly about microaggressions? Because I get this question a lot from people about, like, what exactly is this microaggression thing, and why is everybody talking about it? And it sounds like you're just complaining about little stuff. So I would love your take on microaggressions. Explain it for the folks that maybe have trouble understanding that concept.
I think microaggressions, especially in the workplace, are things that would have commonly be accepted as okay previously, but that really target and make somebody feel uncomfortable. Oftentimes, in this case, it was a Black woman, and there was a comment about something about hair. I forget what the comment was. She felt very targeted by it, and we had to have a whole discussion about intent versus impact. Just because you don't intend for that comment, or it's commonly used in society, like you didn't intend. Do I think this person intended to
hurt her feelings?
No, he was like a decent, like nicer guy,
Yeah.
but he did. And a lot of times the impact is set aside, and then the intent is like, oh, he didn't intend that, which is protecting this person who is not hurt, and this person who is hurt, like who's received that impact is like, oh, they didn't mean to do that.
Yeah.
But like, now you have a bloody nose. Sorry. Like, no,
Right.
sorry.
I didn't mean to punch you.
Didn't mean to.
Yeah.
You were just in the way of some,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and I feel like they often are very little things. Right?
It's
That's why they're
very
called
little
microaggressions,
things. That's
right?
why
They're like very, very little things. But the way I always describe it is like, you deal with these microaggressions, which are the tiny little things, that somebody looking at you funny, the questioning whether you actually know what you're doing, the are you sure you know how to do that? Do you need help lifting that? Did you learn this from your husband? Was your dad a mechanic? Like all of those like little tiny things, or like, oh, those uniform pants look great on you. Like, all those little things that are like
Makes you
nothing.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like not bad in the grand scheme of things. They're little things. It's a little nick. It's a little nick. It's a little nick. It's a little nick. And over time, like you let it go. Like you get a little nick and you're like, oh, okay. It was just a little nick. It didn't punch me in my face. It was just a little nick. And then it's a nick. And then it's a nick. And then it's a nick. And it's 80 times a day. And 20 years later, you look down and you don't have a right arm anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's just been a little bit,
and then it fell off.
And then it falls off. And you're like, well, damn, like I'm really tired. I didn't realize how tired I was of all of those little tiny things that I've just let go over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I'm back to anger instead of solution. Look at that. Yeah.
I mean, I think the solution is in the young people now, getting them early, training them. And as this industry is no longer a grease monkey industry. This industry is a computer programming, detail oriented, high level industry that is open to everybody. And
we need to get that word out.
Yeah.
We need to get that word out.
But it's still
and simultaneously.
So how do you kill this? Because you're not, unless you kill this grease monkey part of the industry, and then people's perception of that, and not only the industry's perception of that, because if you are a computer technician, like those behaviors are not being taught in boot camps or coding camps, or that is not pervasive.
There's the internal issues and then there's the external issues, and we need to tackle both of them simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And they have to happen simultaneously, because we get to the same issue we've got where we can attract new people, but if they're not welcome once they get there, they're not going to stay. So we've got to change that reputation externally as well as internally. And I'm going to go back to, like, I think regulation, certification, proper apprenticeship programs. Mm-hmm. I think that's the answer. And I know a lot of people are going to hate me for that, but I
think that is going to happen. It has to happen, because when you're talking about the complexity of cars today,
we have self-driving cars.
We have
in Phoenix. It's not everywhere yet, but in Phoenix we have.
It's cars. In San Francisco. Yeah. I ride around in Waymo all the time.
Yeah, I rode around in a Waymo, got in a car with no driver, drove me to my shop. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And
do you want any Jimmy Joe Bob fixing?
I used to work with this gentleman who said there's a lot of red toolboxes and not a lot of technicians. And I think that's going to be more and more pervasive. And when these cars, and they're coming,
whether you like it or not,
they're here. It's going to get mass adopted, and they're going to be everywhere. And do you want that car that is driving itself to be worked on by somebody who started yesterday with no training?
Right.
And who this was the person that wanted to do the job, and nobody wants to do the job. So they hired this person to do the job, and they don't even have the skills or the resources to properly train these people, but they're going to be working on your self-driving car. That if it's not calibrated by, like, what is it, 0.2 of an inch or some minute amount, it'll be 20 feet off down the road, and 20 feet in a city is onto the sidewalk.
Yeah. And I think the first time that happens is when we're going to wind up with government imposed regulations. And so I say, like, as an industry, this is my call to action here, right? Like, I think it's coming. Self-driving cars are coming. Regulation is coming, whether we want it or not. It's going to happen, my humble opinion. Wouldn't it be great if we as an industry were the ones that created the regulations? Those of us that are trying to make the industry all that it could be. Mm-hmm. So that it's not coming from people who don't know our industry. So, like, ASE, all of us, let's all get together and create a licensing program and bring it to Washington and get it made law so that it comes from the industry instead of coming from out of the industry.
Because if we don't, bills like right to repair are not going to exist, and it's going to all stay with the manufacturer, right? Because the fear is that people in the aftermarket are not trained to work on these cars, right? So why should we give them the information so they can monkey with them?
Instead, let's create a certification process so the aftermarket is qualified, so that they're not fearful of giving us that information.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm a big proponent of right to repair. I think that that's absolutely the right way to go.
But it's only part of the problem.
But it's also dangerous in some ways, because if we as a country have no way to regulate that, that's a problem.
Absolutely. We're out of our time, which means clearly this needs to be a two-parter, or we need to talk more about this, because that's a whole nother thing. But I just wanted to dip my toe into like pissing people off talking about regulation, because I'm sure not everybody's going to like that idea. But anyway, we've used up our entire hour. Jill, this was fantastic. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. If you want more of this type of conversation, please let me know in the comments. If you have other specific topics that you'd like for us to talk about in the future, please let me know about that as well. I want to give you guys what you want as far as episodes. So definitely let me know. And make sure you come back next week. We have another incredible tradeswoman for you to meet. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for hanging out with us for this evening. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with Jill as much as I did. And come back next week. And every Monday, we release an archive episode as well. So twice a week, you get an opportunity to meet and hear from an incredible tradeswoman or listen to us rant about crazy topics. And until next time, be good to yourselves. Be good to one another. See you later.
Be a good human.
Be a good human. Bye, guys.
Bye.